hopefully influence policy, and hopefully I can do that in my position on the task forces, and then feedback and, again, get to a healthy population and a healthy ecosystem. And my last slide is, what can you do? You all know what you can do. You're an advocating group. Don't forget about this problem during the off season. It's not a bad year this year. The lake levels were kept low. Discharges were minimal to none, even though there was algae out there. It will be back. We will have this problem again. It's just a matter of time. Educate yourself, understand your risks. Don't be scared. Just understand, when you shouldn't potentially go in the water. I don't think anyone needs to be told this. Pressure every representative you can, be it city, state, federal. Tell them you want action on this. It makes a difference. Demand action and funding. I always say funding. Science is really expensive, and the scientists want to do this work, but they don't work for free. They need to feed their families too. So I constantly beg for money from the states, federal government, what have you, because we do need the support. And I would love to say we're fully funded and everything's great, but it's not that way. And I'll stop that.
Questions, but I thought that was so important.
Can you copy that onto that?
Okay, we'll start with Maggie and then come this way.
It would seem that
If you could copy this onto it as well.
would be young children on Lake Okeechobee who ate fish regularly from the lake, who swam in it, and who breathed it. Is anybody, anywhere, looking at those children to see what kind of levels they got?
So they will look at children, but they'll look at adults too, like fishermen that go out and are constantly recreationally exposed. So we started looking at people that were occupationally and recreationally exposed right around St. Lucie Estuary last year when it was bad in here. So I mean, we've done that. Right. So we're also going out to Lake Okeechobee as well. The Department of Health, as I said, they've released, I think, $650,000 to start conducting those studies. 4 different universities have been funded to do it. We're one of them, so we will be doing it. The CDC is also, and they're a partner with us, so we know what they're doing. They're doing it, but you're right about one thing. If you're going to look for these kind of effects, it's unfortunately it's in pregnant women and children where it's usually easiest to detect. It's not so easy in adults that have many other mitigating factors. Like blue-green algae produce liver toxin. That's generally what they do. They'll destroy your liver. A lot of people, when they get older, have been drinking their whole life. Their liver's already kind of gone. So you have to separate out that, all these confounding effects. You don't want to misdiagnose what was really the driving factor. So, but no, you're right, and the work has started, but it's a long way to go. I mean, we're just starting this.
So Jim, on that kind of the CDC, you mentioned they're starting to study, but it's kind of limited to certain.
It's limited to fishermen, I believe.
Yeah. Is there?
And there's a big pushback because they don't want that study. The fishermen don't want to participate in that study. And you know what? I don't. You can't make people give blood and do all this, and you have to be also cognizant when you're going to do this kind of work. Well, their livelihood is dependent on this. It's going to be an economic problem if the CDC comes out and says, well, they're all dying of poison. It's like, okay, that's not good for them.
But it's something that they will pursue, but can they expand that area just because fishing into just that one area? They can talk about the estuaries as well.
Well, and I think we're going to be definitely doing the estuaries, and I believe Florida Gulf Coast, although we're working with them as well, they're going to be looking at the Caloosahatchee going out to that side. I mean, it's a $650,000, in all honesty, is nothing. You're talking about doing a longitudinal health study, which really should take place over about 10 years to get a result that you would actually believe. It's like looking at lead poisoning or any of those studies. They took a long time. It's going to take millions upon millions of dollars to do these health studies correctly. So we're going to the federal government because they have the money.
Okay, Mike, and then Gary. So Mike.
Yeah, Dr. First of congratulations for your appointment to the task force.
Oh, yeah.
We're
Thank
very
you.
encouraged by that. Speaking
Speak up
about
as much as you
testing.
can, so everybody
Yeah,
can-
sure. Speaking of testing, I know there's unwilling people out on the lake. We had 70 very willing people in our county do the test. Adam Schaefer from Hart Branch. It's been about a year and a half ago, and I understand the funding. We had a positive result across the board for nasal inhalation, microcystin in our body. So I think myself, I've been an algae chaser for about 5 years, like a tornado chaser. I was around it so much, documenting it. So gentleman next to me, we did this a lot. So I'm concerned about what the effects in my body have been. Where does it stand right now with the samplings you took? Can we expect to see your analysis results? How about our blood results? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. That's a very good question. So, and this is something we get asked by reporters all the time. So when we do, health studies are the most sensitive of all studies. You actually have to keep people's privacy, you have to be very careful how you do it. The one thing you cannot do as we're a university, we cannot release peer reviewed results. In other words, we do the study, we have to work up the data, then it has to get through peer review, through other doctors and medical people to say, yes, all these procedures were correct, we have faith that this study was done correctly. Because you don't want to scare people and just say, well, we found this and that's it. And some, during that, a reporter actually talked to Adam and it got out that, yeah, he had seen a positive result. That was never supposed to be publicly released. However, it got out there. Those studies have now been written up, the analysis have been done, 2 of them are in peer review right now. So I would think, I'm gonna guess there should be, those papers should be released and that, those studies, the results of those studies should be out, I would say within a month, maybe a month and a half. And this is just medical science, medical review is even harder than just regular science review. The typical time from doing a study to getting a published paper is usually 2 to 3 years. And unfortunately, it's just the length of time it takes.
Where will they be published?
They're gonna be published in, I forget, it's the Journal of Environmental Health was one of them. They will be in real journals, but the PDFs will be available. We'll have them like on the Harbor Branch website or the center website. So all that is being done. The only thing I don't know if we've got into peer review is the blood testing. I would have to ask Adam. I'm not sure about that, but the other stuff has been worked out.
Thanks for answering that. I know that it shows the urgency of people wanting that information or need to know information, so that's why the pressure's on. Kenny, then Gary, then.
Real quick, I'll be very brief.
Yep.
I suffered skull fracture 4 weeks ago, so excuse me if I misstate what I'm trying to convey to you. You said, it said 78% of the phosphorus and nitrogen was coming from agriculture. Should we start there?
Yes.
I would go after the big whale instead of.
Okay,
the little
and
fish.
no, exactly, and for that, for that BMAP, yes, that's exactly what we have to do, is go after agriculture, because in that, if we're worried about Lake Okeechobee and blue-green algae, and that's a big source for both coasts right now, yes, exactly, we need to do that. But if you ask me what's going on in a particular area over here in the lagoon, it might not be agriculture that we have to put a priority on. That's the whole issue, is what do we do?
Thank you, Gary, and then
Jim
Gary.
Gary, thank you very much for your presentation. It's probably the clearest, well documented I've seen, so thank you. Thank you for your effort on the task force. I've attended a meeting, I've read your literature, I've read the consensus document, it's excellent. I had to support your premise that Florida can't be a leader, and you probably would agree with me that in order to really lead in this, you have to have an honest, accurate reporting system. And one of the recommendations I've provided to the task force as well as to DEP is improvements that we've made, not only to BMAT, progress reports, but to the water quality website that you referenced. I want to hand you 2 documents. One is just a simple bar chart comparing the BMAT loads to the lakes that they report to the public and the governor and the legislature, that's in the red bar, versus what they actually are, versus what the Water Management District publishes those reports, and that's just the northern 6 watersheds. And they vary, if I remember, from 19 to 49% discrepancy. That's a real discrepancy in the pollution that's going to Lake Okeechobee, and that's being reported and presented by
consensus document, we actually kind of dealt with this. And
We dealt with it in the way that what we don't have, we have numbers like this, but very little of these are backed up by really robust monitoring. It's like, okay, let's figure out that, what is this? One of the biggest things in that document is the state really needs to improve its monitoring. A lot of these numbers are generated by, well, this is the way we modeled it to be.
Right, that's the side.
Right, I know.
The measure side, and that was the big recommendation I made, is use the measured data. Which
Right.
the TMDL is set by Florida Administrative Code, says you use measured data. IDP is getting away with not. Anyway, that's something that I think that you can help, and I'll help. The second, you referenced the water quality website, and I had conversations with Tom Fraser. My comments in the newspaper and to Tom is that what they put out there is a fantastic idea.
Right, it's not done.
It's not done.
It's not done
Very
anyway.
receptive, but the key information that they put out there is extremely misleading to the public, particularly the phosphorus concentrations.
Mhm.
They, throughout scientific literature for 50 years, we've used parts per billion. They converted it by a factor of 1,000 milligrams per liter. But the biggest misleading information is they use a speedometer type icon that has a all the numbers are way in that low level, and they're almost in the green. And you and I both know
No,
the
it's
reality
not the
is
case.
it's in the yellow and red. And I
Mhm.
provided that graphic, which was prepared by Todd Durlow and myself,
Mhm.
as a much clearer way to get across to the public where the phosphorus concentrations are. And those are from solid water quality sampling stations. So it's this accuracy in reporting that perhaps the group can help us with in the future. Thank you.
And you are exactly right, and it's not like I'm trying to, when I show that, hey, the state's starting this, I by no means mean that that's a finished product, because it's not. And I haven't even honestly gone to look at what they're posting yet, because I know it's a work in progress, and once they say, okay, now it's up and running, then I will review it and say, all right, this isn't right. The task force will deal with this, and you've got 5 scientists on it. All we want to see are hard numbers. We don't want to see modeling results. We don't want to see predicted, this is what we think comes out of here. But our frustration is finding enough numbers and accurate numbers to actually do the job that needs to be done.
I think I can help you. Well, Gary can help you.
I know.
We'll take a few more questions, and I'm sorry, Paul, on that situation, or?
Yeah,
can we
kind
go
of
there?
follow-up question. When you talk about monitoring algae blooms, there's a lot of challenges. We're used to plants growing, like our grass grows in our yard, and it grows kind of slow. But you talk about algae, how fast can they change their biomass? Can you be there one day and the bloom's not there, the next day it is? And then how hard is it to track them? Because you also talk about them being able to migrate up and down.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the challenges of accurately monitoring and tracking algae blooms?
That's a great question. I've spent most of my career before coming to Florida looking at the phenomenon of phytoplankton thin layers, which are the whole population will be in an area in a 100-meter water column or 300-foot water column will be restricted to less than 3 feet. Good luck finding them if you don't target that exact water. So it's a sampling problem. Algae, their growth rates are highly, as you would guess, are highly variable depending on the species. Some can double their population in one day. Their growth rate is a division per day, so you just do the math, it takes like a week and there can be a huge bloom. Some are very slow, like Microcystis is not an incredibly fast grower. I think it's normally around a half a division per day. So it's not gonna be overnight, it's gonna take a week or two for a serious bloom to occur. So it's really species dependent. Now the sampling part, Microcystis is a good example too. If it's a windy day, the Microcystis is probably going to be spread out throughout the water column, or it might get pushed up against the shore. If it's a perfectly calm day, it's all going to be sitting right at the surface, or a vast majority of it. We just published a paper on trying to find Microcystis in Lake Erie and found that, again, there'd be a population peak in the middle of the water. It actually goes up and down, and it would kind of sit somewhere in the middle, not necessarily at the surface. So you have to have people that are monitoring correctly for the species that's out there. It's not always easy to find them. Generally, they do integrated water samples, so they try to sample the whole water column so they at least vertically can understand where it is, but even that is not always successful. So it is a challenge, and it has to be done right. That costs money to do it right. And then understanding the growth rates, we have a pretty good handle on that, but like I said, it depends on which algae you're talking about, how quickly it can occur. Some are quite fast in growing though.
Thanks, Blair, and then two more.
My question is regarding Kenny's whale and Gary's information. The whale being ag and the information being clearly coming from the northern watershed where the pollution's coming from. You wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the toxic microsystem toxin to our estuary and to the Calusa algae. So I think that's the key. There are a lot, you presented a lot of different algae, you presented a lot of different sources, but it's clearly it's one for us. And for the reason we're here today is because of the pollution that we've seen and the toxic water we've seen in the both coastal estuaries. So the question is, in your summation, you didn't come up with a regulatory or regulation or enforcement. The feed map doesn't work. Best management practices don't work. We know the whales in the room, they don't want regulation, they don't want to be enforced. How do we not present to the governor and to our legislature enforcement and regulation? Because that's what we can go to them with. But if you, as a task force, don't recommend that, and you stay with the status quo, it's a difficult thing for us to see change, because it just seems like a lot more testing, a lot more studies.
But you're saying exactly what I tried, when I said, yeah, we came up with a consensus document. You've got to understand the size of all the different issues we have to deal with, okay? And if you look at the task force and all the information we were given, it's like, all right, we have to just have to summarize that. Now, in talking about it, when we were talking about BMAPs, you heard quite a few members on the task force say, yeah, this system doesn't work. To get into specific, if we just go, okay, all we're gonna deal with is Lake Okeechobee and the Lake Okeechobee BMAP and the enforcement of that, we're leaving all that other stuff
Would that be okay?
behind. But that serves just that. 78% of just that problem in that BMAP. We have to deal with the entire state. So if we just say, well, the hell with the rest of the state, we're just gonna do Lake Okeechobee, the rest of the state's not gonna be so happy with us.
Yeah, but we were.
No, I mean, I'm being somewhat hyperbolic, but that is exactly what we kind of said in the consensus document is, okay, here is just the scope of the problem. It's a scoping document. Now we have to actually go back, and the next meeting is January 23rd, so we're gonna be right back at it after the holidays, and do specific recommendations as you're talking about. So that is the next chapter of what the task force is gonna do. Hopefully by then, you'll be happier with what comes out of it.
That's what I was gonna ask, what the next step is, and or recommendations like that. We'll take two more and then, maybe one more, but we gotta wrap up. So, Joe, I have a two-prong point. I'm sorry. Okay. Go ahead. First prong question, go.
On the BMAP for Lake Okeechobee, you have 78% roughly doing ag. But do we know with accuracy how much of that groundwater that is going through the agricultural areas is actually from calcium phosphate solution, in other words, natural, versus what is man-induced? Because if I run the calculation, I run about 25 to 30 parts per billion total phosphorus just in groundwater from nature, from the calcium deposits, the phosphate deposits up in that area of Bartow. So until we start to look at BMAP or go for ag as the culprit, and they may be, I don't know. I think we have to know what the baseline is for nature. And in many cases, if we don't know the baseline, we're sort of going up the wrong avenue. The second point of the question is this. There's approximately 50,000 metric ton, which is 100 million pounds of total phosphorus in the top 4 inches of Lake Okeechobee. So legacy phosphorus is extremely high. That's just the top 4 inches.
Of the sediment.
Of the sediment.
Be clear. Yeah.
The sediment, sorry. The water column at 150 parts per billion is approximately 800 metric tons. The water that comes down of all of the rivers roughly ends up around 500 metric tons per year. That's 1% of what is in the top 4 inches of the lake. All of that gets stirred up and is increasing. The evidence I've seen from DP hydro data, not FDEP data, real data, is that the concentration of the total phosphorus is going up with time, not down. What can we do, what can the task force and what can the state do about it?
So in summary, your two questions are, one about the natural background coming from groundwater
Yes.
inflows. The other point was the legacy phosphorus and how much that contributes to.
Well, no, what can we do to stop that?
The increasing level, or what we can do to stop that.
Yeah, so,
and cleanup.
All right, long question, but we'll get to it and we'll try to get some more real quick.
yeah, so I'm actually, so I want to encourage you, you brought that up, and this gets to, again, the science is not definitive on where the loading is. So we do, again, this gets to monitoring, and that same question was asked by some members on the task force. It's like, how can we trust even the stuff out of DB Hydro? You know, do we have the right numbers? You know, this is what they monitor. So you're saying, okay, groundwater is yet another source that we may not be taking account of, and we're just gonna lay it on ag, and that's gonna be it. As scientists, you're like, well, we can't, because we don't actually have the full picture. So it still speaks to that, do we have enough data to actually do what we need to do today? Because we don't want to just start regulating and then find out, well, nothing changed. You know, we did go after the wrong thing, although we know ag is definitely a source. The legacy of the lake, we have not even got to what kind of mitigation plan could possibly do that. Now, you have seen, they put out a call for technologies to deal with cleaning up nutrients. FDEP has a call right now, but the scale of what needs to be done, I don't know the economics of it and how that's gonna shake out, but that is something that, you know, the task force will address. We just got at the very basic level. Dealing with legacy loads is yet another thing we're gonna have to deal with, but that's gonna be a technological solution. It's already there. You can't stop it coming in.
Okay, we have Jackie, and then maybe one more question, and then I will be patient. Be patient, Cindy.
I have always thought that if 10 years ago we would have just listened to Gary Goforth, we'd be in much better shape. But when we do know what we're supposed to know, like what Joe talks about and what you talk about, then what? Then what? You know, I'm already 85, I'll never see any solution.
We'll study to study.
However, we know about glyphosate, don't we? We know what that does, and we still do nothing about it. The fish and wildlife are spraying everywhere. So I'm like a little upset that this is really a political problem, which you know I always think things are. And I personally, for these little kids that Maggie cares so much about, that we care about, we've got to get that political solution. And it did not help to have politicians in Tallahassee telling us there was no, you shouldn't say climate change. That's it.
There you go. We'll take one more in the back, yes?
Okay, we have a huge problem with how you manage the aquatic weeds. And that is the glyphosate problem that we're talking about. That adds the nutrients. It's not even on your list. And we are not allowing, pardon?
Herbicides.
Herbicides, but it's not the aquatic weed issue. And we've got over 20 boats a day dumping that stuff in our lake. The algae actually, we've got literature to prove the algae will live on the glyphosate, the phosphate in the glyphosate. And it feeds it. So why can't we do mechanical harvesting? Somebody wants to take weeds around from their sailboat buoys and they get thrown in jail. It could be used for compost. It could be used for all sorts of things, for feed. But you won't let us privately do mechanical
Not the
harvesting.
government.
Be careful.
I'm not the government. I'm a volunteer on the task force.
But we need to deal with that problem. You're burning it, I mean, you, meaning
Wait, that's
the burning is releasing.
Actually, it's
huge-
we, it's all of us.
Right.
It's our government.
But how are we gonna address that issue? So
But we
Well,
need,
let's-
we.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Well, no, I will, you bring up a very good point, and I put it, it was on there, it was herbicides. The reason I put it as other factors is we haven't even had, the task force has only met to talk about what's going on 5 times. That's not a lot of time to go through everything we have to go through. The next on our list is, if you read the consensus document, I believe it's in there, is dealing with glyphosate. Is dealing with these other sources that we know are out there, but they're not septic, they're not ag, some of the things that we have regulations in place for, which also needs to be addressed too. I mean, it's a lot. It's overwhelming at times, but it is on the list of what we're supposed to be talking about.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. I really gotta kind of wrap it up. Did you have? Okay, and Ty, can you hold on for a little bit? Thank you all. I know you've got inquisitive minds here that all want to know more. I know. And we so appreciate the last 45 minutes having May stick around for a little bit afterwards too for some questions really quick. We're going into progress reports from the different agencies and groups. So we're gonna go quickly though through them. So stick around. We've got Mark County, St. Lucie County, City of Stewart, the Water Management District, and some other agency reports and stuff. We're gonna go quickly through. If they don't have much to report, they're gonna report much, but we wanna get that opportunity. So start with Mark County. Mark County here. I didn't see anybody from Mark County staff here today. Okay, usually John or somebody's here, Kate, so we'll pass on. St. Lucie County, is Patrick here, Patrick Dillon? He was here last meeting, we appreciate him coming, we're gonna encourage them to come and still give us updates or reports in the North Fork and other areas in St. Lucie. City of Stewart, Ben, I saw Ben here earlier. Ben, you wanna make some comments real quick? Yeah. There we go. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon now. Just a really quick, especially if you're a citizen or resident of Stewart, we do have on December 11th a workshop coming up for our comp plan. So our comprehensive plan is under review by our development department. We've already had one public meeting. There are some other meetings that are occurring with other groups, which is like Downtown Business Association, I think is encouraging folks to come out for that as well. But the city has another meeting, and I just want to make you all aware, if you are a resident, on December 11th from 5:30 to 7:30, there is going to be a public workshop. There will be other workshops at the beginning of next year. I believe the intent is for the commission to kind of wrap this up sometime maybe in April or May. There is a firm date on when we need to have it complete by. Why is the comp plan important? It's because there's elements in it, and we're reviewing coastal element right now, especially for global climate change. I'm actually glad that Dr. Sullivan brought that up. We're reviewing that for resiliency options. That's something that South Florida's been working on big time. We're going to kind of wrap our ideas into something as well. But in addition to that, I don't know if you know, but in our comp plan, we also talk about water quality. We talk about water supply, those kinds of issues. And it's really has to do with the number 3 item that Dr. Sullivan had on his presentation, which is land use and planning and development in the future and how that impacts. Even if we solve Lake Okeechobee tomorrow, human growth, human development is still going to have impacts to water quality, and it's something that we need to address now, and so it is prevented for the future. So again, if you're a resident of the city, it's important, I think, to be a part of those discussions, to bring all that you've learned in these meetings to those discussions, so that staff is, if I'm not aware of it, not bringing it up, you're bringing it up, and then that way staff knows to focus on it. And then in addition, the only other thing I'll say is that the PDT meetings with the Army Corps continue. No, Mark Kenny wasn't here to say it, so I'll just say on behalf of everybody that's involved. We didn't meet, although we were supposed to originally last month. The reason why is because some of the subcommittees are working very, very hard and diligently behind the scenes. They're working on the modeling part right now, and we assumed that the modeling part was going to be some of the more involved and technical. We are still having some challenges there in the performance measurement. Those are critical pieces of the puzzle, because how the Army Corps measures its success for the next LOSUM, otherwise the next WARS, Lake Okeechobee regulation schedule, that is all based on those performance measurements. And if we have the wrong measurements in place,
then what we're basing success on is not gonna bring success to the estuaries as well. So it's just something to be mindful of. There'll be more public dates coming up for those at the beginning of the year. There is a webinar that's gonna occur in December. But as far as the next one that you can go to, I believe it's gonna be in Lake Okeechobee, the next physical location. The last one was in Homestead. So the next one will be a lot closer to this area, and that one should be in January. So stay up to date and follow those if you do want to take
Where do we find that information?
on the district website. But feel free to, if you need my card or anything, feel free to call me. I'm happy to help as well. So, but I think that's it.
Thanks. Appreciate it. As Ben mentioned, we actually, the Rivers Coalition moved our meeting to today because tomorrow, Thursday, the 21st, was going to be a LOSUM PDT meeting in Okeechobee. But they had 6 different sub-teams, subgroups on water quality and different issues, 6 different subgroups that are meeting. And they explained they needed time to get that information together before they have the next PDT meeting, which is the Project Delivery Team. So y'all ought to get with these acronyms. I don't expect everybody to know that, but so whenever we say an acronym, we would try to get it. But it's the Project Delivery Team for LOSUM, or the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual, which is the next Lake Okeechobee schedule. So we're pleased to introduce our South Florida Water Management District Governing Board members, Jack and Phil.
Hi, everybody. Jackie Thurlow, Midfish. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Sullivan for an awesome presentation. And having served on the Harbor Branch board for the foundation, early on, before all this really got going, ladies and gentlemen, it's so great that we keep pushing hard, but we must appreciate where we've come. Please give him another round of applause. When I met him, I said to myself, I couldn't believe it. They asked if I could have lunch with him when they hired him as the new executive director, and I was like, oh my gosh, he is the real deal. And that's an exciting example of the progress that we've made. As far as the district, my favorite thing was that I got to go on a tour with Blair and Florida Sportsman and his reporter. What was the name of your reporter again? Trey Wheeler. And he got to hear everything, so I hope he never reports the whole conversation in a truck. But we went on a tour of the C-44, which is the C-44 reservoir in STA that the governor just came down to open up the first cells. And I am so glad that Blair pushed us to go on this tour because it was phenomenal. And if you're ever out on Citrus or, take a look at this thing. And it's kind of, unnerving the size of it. It is just tremendous. I think 10,000 acres. And it used to be citrus. And now one day, within a couple of years, it will be only taking the water from the C-44 and cleansing it before it gets back to us. Our meeting was on the other side of the state. We got to see the C-43, another giant big structure that is similar. It was great to have the meeting